Yet what could I do? I had no witnesses against the priest, and could not but consider myself fortunate that he had not claimed as a legacy the house and the goods of my father. This was the first calamity that befell me, but from that time misfortunes succeeded each other. My reputation as a physician spread but slowly, because I was ashamed to play the quack, and I wanted everywhere the recommendation of my father, who would have introduced me to the wealthiest and noblest persons, who now no longer thought of poor Zaleukos. Neither could I find customers for my father's goods, for all had gone elsewhere after his death, and new ones came but slowly. Once, sadly reflecting on my situation, it occurred to me that I had often seen in France men of my native land, who travelled through the country, exposing their goods in the marketplaces of the towns. I remembered that they easily found customers because they came from a foreign country, and that by such traffic one might profit 100-fold. My resolution was soon taken. I sold my father's house, gave part of the money I received for it to a tried friend to keep for me, and with the rest I purchased such things as are seldom seen in the West, viz., shawls, silks, ointments, and perfumes. Having engaged a berth in a ship, I thus set out on my second voyage to France. As soon as I had turned my back on the castles of the Dardanelles, it seemed as if fortune would again smile on me. Our passage was short and prosperous. I travelled through large and small towns, and found everywhere ready purchasers of my goods. My friend in Constantinople supplied me constantly with fresh goods, and I daily became more wealthy. When at length I thought I had saved enough to risk a greater enterprise, I went to Italy. But I must here mention that I derived no small additional profit from the healing art. Whenever I entered a town, I announced by bills that a Greek physician had arrived, who had already cured many, and truly my balsams and medicines brought me in many a zecchino. I now reached the city of Florence in Italy, where I purposed remaining for some time, as I liked it much, and wished to recover from the fatigues of my travels. I had a shop in the quarter called Santa Croce, and in an inn, not far from thence, 2 beautiful rooms which led to a balcony. Having made these arrangements, I had my bills placarded about, announcing myself as a physician and merchant. I had no sooner opened my shop than I had crowds of customers, and though my prices were rather high, I sold more than others, because I was civil and obliging to my customers. When I had thus pleasantly spent 4 days in Florence, I was one evening about closing my shop, and only had to examine my stock of boxes and ointments, as was my custom, when I found in a small jar a piece of paper which I did not recollect to have put there. On opening it, I discovered that it was an invitation for me to appear that night at 12 o'clock precisely on the bridge called Ponte Vecchio. I conjectured a long time who it could possibly be that invited me thither, but not knowing a soul in Florence, I thought someone wished perhaps to take me secretly to some sick person, which was not uncommon, and I therefore determined to go. However, I took the precaution to buckle on the sword my father had given me. When it was near midnight, I set out on my way, and soon arrived at the Ponte Vecchio. I found the bridge forsaken and lonely, and determined to await the person who had appointed to meet me. It was a cold night, and the moon shone brightly, and I looked down on the waves of the Arno glistening in the moonlight. The church clocks now struck the midnight hour. I looked up, and saw before me a tall man, enveloped in a red cloak, a corner of which he had drawn over his face. At first I was rather terrified at his suddenly appearing behind me, but soon recovered myself and said, "If you have summoned me hither, say what is your command." The red cloak turned round and slowly said, "Follow me." I felt somewhat uneasy at the thought of following the stranger alone, so I stood still, saying, "Nay, sir, please first to tell me whither. Moreover, you might let me have a peep at your face, that I may see whether you intend any good with me." But the red cloak did not seem to mind my words. "If you will not follow, Zaleukos, stop where you are," he said, and then went on. Now my anger was roused, and I cried, "Think you a man like me will submit